Hello, thank you for the opportunity. Uh, just days ago, we would have started this debate in a completely different manner, but obviously the news that broke about the direct talk between uh, two presidents, Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump, actually, who first reached out, change apparently the paradigm of our talk. So I will try to focus on what this means and are we on a good way to a peace plan or ending this ridiculous war, as Putin wants to say. Nothing is ridiculous in a provoked war because the war was provoked by United States, by NATO, supported by NATO, and the warring party into this conflict. The Ukrainians are sandwiched and actually collateral damage, battlefield, and soldiers for the major force of Euro-Atlantic community and its aspirations to weaken, to bleed out Russia. It seems that history shows that it's much easier to start a war, especially if you have it in mind, in your cards already, as it was the case with this war, than to stop it. Mr. Putin warned about these developments, and he was not a prophet. He was just a realist. And he warned about these developments during the Munich 2007 conference. Then we know what followed and all these attempts to find a compromise solution, especially for the Russian-speaking and Russians in Ukraine, because Ukraine is a divided society, failed. So now there is we are finding ourselves in a very delicate situation. One part of the world is puzzled. The other part is euphoric about peace, finally ending this war. And the third part is doing what I usually call peace prevention. The announcement of the new Secretary of Defense during the NATO ministerial summit recently shook the Europeans. Many of them showed their real nature and that they are not so soft power and peace loving family. And they insist actually on continuing the war until the last Ukrainian. In this regard, Mr. Putin, the United States, Mr. Trump and his team are alone, but they can afford that because they are the superpower. Without United States, there is no NATO. They're now washing their hands out of this war, not even taking the blame for starting it, despite the rhetoric that it was Biden, not Trump. He would have not allowed this to happen. We don't know that because he actually started militarization of Ukraine long ago and made it a de facto NATO member state, not de jure. What we know at this point about this plan and how feasible it is, I don't know, because we are dealing with a man who has not spelled out his vision of the world. And actually, what he mentioned is very worrisome about taking territories, buying real estate, deportation of Gazans, and then actually finishing the genocide. So he behaves as a character from a literature that we know well, Mr. Jekyll and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We don't know when each of them will appear on the scene and what will be his moves. Obviously, he is transactional. His talk to Mr. Putin did not connect only Ukraine in those 90 minutes of talk. What we heard from his closest ideas and team is also contradictory, because peace-loving president and his team are talking at the same time about ending the ridiculous war in Ukraine and then making NATO and their own army more lethal. They talk about revival of the warriors' mindset and force of the military in Pentagon, which means they're preparing for another war. So putting down one fire, that doesn't mean that we are entering in a more peaceful world. Maybe things are changing in a more global terms. In a normal situation, what I would have expected is to see these people shaking their hands. That's fine. First talking, shaking hands, meeting somewhere in Saudi Arabia or on any other ground, and then bringing this issue to the place where it should be fully resolved in a credible way. It is United Nations. Talking about peacekeeping forces, about disarmament, about demining or humanitarian aid or reconstruction of the country, everything should have been settled there. If they have really serious intention to do so, they would have explained that to their partners, especially in the UN Security Council, the permanent five, and ask for their support and assistance, why not, to make a closure to this catastrophe. And that would have been a good sign for the future. Now I'm a little bit skeptical. First of all, I don't know how trustworthy is the US partner. He faces sabotage from within, from some of his European allies. Ukrainians are divided, and of course angry because nobody asks them about their own future. They are like a pawn on a checkboard. And it looks to me as we are moving toward a world in which there is no multilateralism. There is not even multipolarity, as we hope, because Trump, as a strong man, wants to deal with other strong men and make transactional deals. I'm afraid that the world, instead of ending with cooperative multipolarity, would end up into some new form of redesigning the world and division of spheres of interest. Of course, we have to be watchful. We have to be alert and to insist as peace movements, as intellectuals, as people concerned about the peace everywhere in the world, to make pressure on the leaders and to tell them that we know when they lie and when they try to present a defeat as a victory, or to present the peace plan that actually has nothing to do with peace, because peace is not absence or ceasefire or holding the military hostilities. It is much more than that. And I, coming from a region that suffered and has personal experience in developments like this, I know how long it is the path to some kind of sustainable peace, but with deep scars, with pressures and uncertainty that things will really end up good for the future generations. Thank you very much for your attention.